So I got to cut down this board. This used to be a lot bigger. This was, I think, a 30 by 40 inch sheet. Strathmore Series 500 3-ply vellum surface. And I'm cutting it down to 13 by 19 inches. Now, normally I work at 11 by 17, but I thought because this is a special project, it's the last 12 cover, and also because I've never had a printer this size. I wanted to go ahead and do a slightly larger size, and also because there's so many figures in this particular cover. Now, I'm being pretty precise here, but I don't actually have to be all that precise because I'm going to eventually print my color study onto this piece of paper. And when I do that, it'll automatically print it at the right proportions. So the paper size, it'll look nice, it'll look square, but the actual painting area will be an inset of this 13 by 19 perimeter. Alright, so this is the cover that I will be painting. As you can see, I like to design with the title and the UPC code on the actual color study, because that's what's going to end up going there, and if you don't want it to cover up something, you got to kind of plan for it. But I keep it on separate layers. So most of this is painted with the airbrush. And I started doing this a few covers ago, just because it was an easy way to get the general sense of what I wanted without committing to too much anatomy. Like, obviously this is, I spent a lot of time on this color study, but like the whole thing's there. It's essentially, in my mind, it's done, but I haven't spent too much time worrying about, I know where every button goes on his double-breasted coat, but I haven't actually drawn, each one's like a perfect circle or anything like that. So we have the color study printed out on 13 by 19 paper, and the next thing I'm going to do is tape it down to the board. And this not only keeps it flat the entire time, but also gives us a nice edge at the end. And so the board is galvanized steel, and I pretty much always draw and paint on some kind of steel board. That way I can use my trusty magnets. This is just white artist tape. It's good at sticking, but not too good, in that it will release at the end, but you still have to be kind of careful, especially in the corners. The way my setup is now, I have my computer screen right next to me, so I don't really print out reference anymore. I just look at the computer screen, and so in this case I'll actually bring up the actual painting. And it's actually better than a printout, because this is how I did the original color study, so I'm seeing the actual colors I intended at the beginning. But first things first, we have to essentially draw. I'm going to draw here in paint, but it's essentially the same practice. I'll be using gouache as soon as I can find it, and I'll be using mainly two colors, sepia and white. This is my Stay Wet palette. It's a sponge underneath a semi-permeable membrane. That way your paints never dry out. It's the only way to paint if you're using watercolor or acrylic or gouache. Now normally if I'm starting out with a blank sheet of paper, all I need is sepia by itself, but since this has been printed out in pretty much full color, I'm going to need white in order to kind of bring some things out here and there. Alright. So like I said, basically we're just drawing. I'm kind of figuring out the anatomy of each figure. it's going to take a while. Each face has to be rendered appropriately. I might end up taking some reference for things here and there, because basically this entire color study was done without aid of reference. I think I might have shown this last time. This is my brush washer. I added this little thing to help squeeze the water out. So I just run your brush across it, and it takes all the excess water, and then I might dry it off on the paper towel that I've clipped there. Yeah, so as I said, I'm really just, it's almost as if I were drawing with a pencil. I'm just making sure that everything is basically making a good foundation for the final painting. And that's why I keep things simple. Keep it in two tones, sepia and white. And really right now all I'm using is sepia. And then I'll use white when things get when I need to go back in opaquely. All right, here's an example of why we need the white. So I hadn't quite drawn the thumb in the color study, but now that I know where it goes, I know it's going to cover the cape a little bit there. So I'll just go down, grab some white, and just go bam. Maybe add some to the tips of the fingers. And as you can see, the way that I'm painting, it's very an abbreviated shorthand, so that when I do the actual painting, I'm I can concentrate on that because the drawing part is already done. So it's just a question of getting most everything there and getting the figures locked down, so that when you get to the final paint, things move a little bit more quickly. Alright, so now we're going to do the face, and like I said, I haven't taken any reference for this yet. So I'm going to go to one of my Sculptress maquettes. And in this case I'll use Kirsten McDuffie, just as a kind of generic, attractive lady, and kind of move things around to the right position. And I'll see if I have a better lighting sample. While that's not exactly what I want it to look like, it gives me the light source from the angle I want, which is good enough for me. All I'm kind of doing is refining the form. So in order to do that, all I have to do is look and see where the highlights are, and go in and just kind of pop those in. So in a way, the gold is actually pretty nice, because one thing that makes a surface look like gold is because the contrast is higher between your highlight and your midtone. So right now I'm just concerned with the highlight, and the highlights are easier to see when something is painted to look like gold. So we just kind of go in there and just like pick out little bits of light. All right, so we are just past the second major stage of the painting, which is I call it the sepia stage, but really it's I used a couple different colors here. It's really the drawing stage. It's where you're figuring out exactly how all your figures look, which way everyone's looking, how the hands are, basically all the details, so that the next phase, which is color, will go more smoothly, where all you have to do is worry about what color goes where, and you don't have to worry about you know, the way you drew someone's nose. It's kind of all figured out. So in terms of what I did, I used white and sepia. Those were the two main colors, and then I also mixed up green to just take care of the secondary light source, which is the green gas that everybody's choking on. So that's all coming from the bottom, and then I have just kind of an amorphous light up in the top left. And so one of the things I did for the first time with this painting was used almost exclusively 3D models that I had made in Sculptress. So here I made my own material. You can kind of paint however you want things to look. So it comes with default things like you know, just regular clay. You can make something look like gold. I made my own specific to this painting, which I just labeled 12. And so I used this model almost for everyone's hand. Everyone basically has the same pose with just a few minor exceptions and you know, transformations. So, you know, almost each and every single one, you know, that's just what really matters is the hand's relationship to the body and the person who's making the gesture, rather than the way the fingers are. And then of course I have some fists here and there. And then other than that, I have I used kind of like a generic male face and a generic female face. And then also I used Photoshop's 3D capabilities to do the guns. So I got a model of a Colt 1911, and then today I just got a model of a Thompson submachine gun, which is that one right there. And it's upside down because the character is upside down, but it's just easy enough to put it all in the same space with the same lighting. And this is all done in Photoshop CS5 extended version, which has 3D capabilities. The next stage is really just all about color. And the way I go about doing that is using my palette here. It's all done in gouache with a little bit of acrylic, but mostly gouache, touches of watercolor. It kind of depends on what I want to do. If I want something that is that I want to eventually glaze over, then I use acrylic first and then go back over it with more acrylic. If I want to maintain the ability to edit things after I put it down on the painting, then I'll use gouache, because you can always pick gouache back up. So basically this entire painting, everything that I've done so far, was all done in gouache, with the exception of the yellow, which is watercolor. And the reason I like that is because watercolor does not have as much body. And so when you add it, particularly with yellow, it will change the hue without changing things like value. It gets into the problem of undertone versus mass tone, which is a whole nother subject. But basically when I do the next phase, which I'll show under the time-lapse camera, I will arrange my palette in kind of a mimic of the painting that I want here. All right, we just finished the first section of painting. Got up. Started at 8:30. It's about noon now, and started laying in some color. And basically, what I'm trying to do is get the painting to look like my digital color study, which is tough to see. It's on my screen there, which is of course pretty glossy. But all I'm really doing is trying to map out the colors that I'm going to need in order to start doing the final touches. So I've done pretty much all of the drawing that I can previously in the sepia stage, and now I'm just trying to match the colors that I want for the final. So if we look over here, this is my palette. This is generally the way that I arrange my palette. I've got white over in this corner and black over in this corner, and I usually keep sepia and burnt umber up here. I usually have two kinds of red at the least, a warmer and a cooler, alizarin crimson in this case, that's pure red, the Holbein gouache, and then down here we have, I think it's just called dark green. Usually two kinds of blue, one warm, one cool. In this case it's ultramarine and what Holbein calls blue pure. And then over here we have lemon yellow. I've been using a lot of lemon yellow in this particular painting, mainly because there is so much green gas everywhere. So no matter what is in the painting and no matter what depth or position, everything has a little bit of a greenish cast to it. So almost all of the colors that I'm putting down, with the exceptions of maybe some of the bright spots where the other light is hitting it, maybe right here, the pink of his cape and his gloves. Some of those don't have any yellow in them, but most everything else does. I have started doing the final passes on some of the figures. That one right there in the background is Dynamic Man. He's pretty much done. I'm not quite happy with the face, but it might just have to be good enough for now. The hands are pretty much done. Right now I'm working on this guy down here, the fiery mask. It's not quite focusing. And while I'm working on him, I've got a whole section of my palette devoted to just skin tones, and I use the term lightly because these are all pretty green, not what most people would consider flesh tones, but in the course of my painting, the kind of color world that it's in, everything has a greenish cast to it. So I've set things up so that they go darker over here. This color right here, it's actually showing up a lot lighter on the screen than it is in reality. That is my second darkest green, and that's what most of the background is filled with. So I'm kind of using it as my darkest color, but as my darkest color, it also signifies that there is gas between us, the viewer, and wherever that shadow is. So you can see that color right here in the context of the painting. It looks like this, and again it's showing up brighter here than it is in reality, but that's usually just the way things are. Gouache can be tough sometimes because there's such a discrepancy between what you end up mixing and what it dries to be, because when the water evaporates from the pigment, there's usually a shift, not so much in hue, but most definitely in value, but sometimes also in hue and saturation. But as I was saying, this guy, Fiery Mask, is next on the list. He's just about done, and I thought I'd show some of the reference that I've got going. So the middle head figure right there is just my generic male head. I lit it in Photoshop with two lights, and I used the ray tracing segment so that I could actually catch some fairly realistic shadows. I mean, obviously I take liberties. Same thing with the hand, and then over here on the right I just have some general reference. It's a character drawing by Chris Webb. Good morning. It's 8:30 on a Saturday, and I'm about to start the fourth session of painting. I got a pretty good amount of progress done last night. I painted a bunch of faces.
a bunch of hands as well. I kind of lost it on Black Widow. I painted the Black Widow on her torso, but the face I don't really like as much as what I had before, so I'm just going to kind of skip around now. Today I'm going to try and get as much done as possible in terms of covering the entire painting. That way tomorrow all I have to do is kind of touch up and edit any last things that are bothering me. We're in the midst of the second painting session of the day. I'm still kind of into the nitty-gritty, where I'm just going through and painting each and every single detail that I have to. At this point I'm painting the blue blade. I've done pretty much everything except for his face and hair at this point. I tend to go from point to point on the painting according to what colors that I'm using, because I don't really, let's just say mixing paint is the least fun part of the process, so I like to mix the paint that I'm going to use, and as I mentioned before, I'm staying mostly in this section here. You know, everything's kind of has a greenish cast to it, and so I'm going around painting most of the portraits, most of the hands. And then if I really feel like it, in the case of the blue blade, I want to just finish the whole figure, so I'll switch to everything on him that's blue. And then I'll move on to the next point. Here we are at the third and final session of painting for today, Saturday. It's 8:30. I'm going to paint for the next 4 hours and get up and do the same thing tomorrow. I use iCal to kind of plan my day. So as you can see, today there was just 3 big chunks of painting. And I ate in between. I just showered, changed, and I'm all ready to go. I've got my coffee right here. And I don't know, I'm just kind of going through and finishing what needs to get done. I will say I'm pretty happy with the way it's coming out. It's just a question, like I can see the finish line, I know what the goal is, and it's just a question of putting in the hours of finishing everything up. Good morning. It's the first painting session of the day. It's about 9 a.m. on Sunday, and today's the last day of painting, so I should be able to finish it all tonight, get it all scanned and sent in by the due date, which is tomorrow. All that's really left is the big figure up top, who will be mostly obscured by the type, the trade dress. So he doesn't matter that much, but he's still a big figure, and well, he's got to get done one way or the other. I've still got to do the Phantom Reporter's face and Black Widow's face, and then overall just bring everything together. I painted most of the Phantom Reporter's face in the last session. Still got to do his gloves. Still got to do Black Widow, and then Wonder Man up here. I'm realizing I have less time. It's taking longer than I'd hoped, which is always the case, but oh well. I should still be able to finish it all. Most of it by this evening, and then tomorrow morning I'll have to do any of the post-production stuff, like scanning it in and cleaning up things in Photoshop. Cover is all finished, all painted, turned in, and just wanted to go over a couple quick things before we ended the segment. It turned out okay. It always looks better in my head, and when I was just finishing up the last few days of painting, I wasn't as happy with it as I thought I'd be. I like it more now than I did, but it's still, I don't know, it's a lot lighter than I really wanted it to be.
And but I took care of a lot of that in Photoshop, so we just kind of wanted to show the difference between the original painted artwork and the digital file that I actually give to my editors. One thing is I upped the contrast. Then I also gave it a much greener cast, and now I'm not so sure if I like it. The other thing I wanted to show that I've been doing to my paintings lately, and I guess we'll zoom in here. One of the things I do with my paintings in order to make them look more like the original is creating a separate layer. So I will copy the entire canvas, paste it on top, and then blur that layer. And let's see, I think I put it to color. Yeah, the mode of the layer is set to color, and what this does is it kind of averages everything out, because when you scan something, it's a very, very different kind of light from the light when you're looking at something. So when I'm looking at this, colors are looking like they are blending, like skin tones and whatnot. But when I scan it in under that harsh scanning, it just takes on a different quality. You get a lot of, it picks up all the nooks and crannies of the paper, which can be good, but most of the time it just makes everything look a little bit too intense. So I'll just put on, like I said, that other layer, blur it, and then let the rest of it show through. Other than that, I have a bunch of layers right here, some photo filters, curves. I don't know if these are going to be able to show. They're all very, very subtle. The most major one is the curves, and that's what gives it the major contrast. Hue saturation, that's where I go in, and if I don't like a particular color, I'll go in there individually and change it. So in this case, it's his suit. It was too purple. And that's what happens a lot of times too. When I scan something, it's the way, the original looks the way I want it to, but the eye of the scanner reads it as a different color. Other than that, it ended up being about, I want to say 60 hours of painting time. Maybe that was total time, so that included everything from drawing to underpainting to Photoshop. It was a tough cover just because there's so many figures. And while I like individual parts of it, I'm happy with like individual figures. Overall, I feel like it doesn't have the same impact as the other 12 covers. Like when I put it in my collection right here and kind of looked at them next to the other, the composition just isn't as strong. That when you squint, it just looks like a lot of people together, whereas all the other ones are very, very graphic and will probably stand out more on the comic shelf. But it was the last piece, and that was a requirement. It had to have all the characters, so kind of did my best to fit them all in.